Welcome to the channel, everyone. My name is Jason. Again, I'm the founder and CEO of Behind Bars Blueprint, an organization that has established a proven system to help individuals navigating the incarceration process before, during, after, and even beyond. Today, we're going to talk about something that I don't want anyone to take the wrong way, but it is very important because it's truthful, and that is why some people just simply aren't ready for release yet. Let's get started. So I get it. This is uncomfortable, but it's true. It's that not everyone is ready for release. Even though their out date may be up, let's be honest, a lot of people just aren't ready for release. And to pretend that that's not true actually hurts the individual and the families involved in that. And that's why we need to talk about this. What exactly do I mean when I say some people simply aren't released yet? Well, the first thing I'm going to tell you is I'm not advocating that people stay in past their out date. Not even close. I'm going to get into that in each core section of this video, and I hope it makes sense by the time we're done. So before I jump into any of the core principle of this, I want to make sure that we understand something that, number one, this is not about punishment. This is not about worth. This is not about giving up on people. This is about readiness. I'm talking about how ready is an individual when they're getting ready to get out of jail or prison. And that's something that we all have an opinion on, whether we realize or not, or whether we even think we should or not, because it's very important. I mean, the bottom line is either someone is ready to be released or they're not. But what does that exactly look like? And what would readiness look like? What does it look like now? And what would it look like in a little bit better environment? You see, readiness, time served, let's put it this way, time served does not equal ready. It's the core point that, number one, that I want to get to. And we're going to basically talk about how that looks throughout the entire process. Just because it's your out date doesn't necessarily mean you're ready. So like I said, core principle number one is time served does not necessarily equal readiness. You're not exactly ready or may not be ready just because the prison doors swing open, okay? See, serving time does not equal internal change. It does not mean that you made good use of your time while you were there, or that your loved one made good use of their time while they're there. There's a lot of downtime, believe it or not, and people that have served time, you know what I'm talking about with this. It's an environment where you have a lot of time on your hands if you don't use it properly. It also doesn't mean that, because you were compliant doesn't mean you're stable. So what does stability look like? Well, where am I being released to? Who am I being released to? What environment am I being released into? So it's not just yourself internally, but it's also what am I being released out into? That also can affect readiness or the lack thereof. The behavior while you're incarcerated, just because it's you're under supervision, okay? But just because the behavior while you're incarcerated looks one way, it doesn't mean it's going to look that way in freedom. I've seen a lot of guys, and we deal with a lot of guys, did fantastic in prison. And I know what that sounds like, but did a great job. I mean, little to no write-ups, didn't really get into a lot of trouble, didn't do a lot of things wrong, worked a job. And then when they get out, they just swerve into oncoming traffic. And it just doesn't make any sense unless you understand what's going on behind this. Again, just because you're doing well here doesn't mean you're ready here. Core principle number two that we want to talk about is the warning signs. How can we look at an individual and determine, do they show signs of someone that's ready for release, or maybe they're not quite ready yet? And that can come in a variety of different ways. I've seen this one a lot. This is probably the number one issue that I see with as far as readiness is concerned, and that is constant outward blame. There's really very little internal, here's what I could do better, here's what I should have done better, here's where I can improve, which kind of leads into there's no demonstration of self-regulation, because that's what that leads to. There has to be a sign, there has to be an example, a show of self-regulation. What does that mean? Well, that's exactly what it sounds like. I'm making good choices. I'm not making poor choices. I'm not going where I shouldn't be. I'm on time. I'm showing up for my job, whatever that may be. It could be, and that's inside or out. You have jobs in jails and prisons as well. How did you do in there? It's one of those, do I have a pattern of dodging rules? There's a lot of guys that do that, or manipulating the system, or the list can go on and on. But what we're looking for the warning signs is basically, is somebody a good self-regulator? Is somebody able to say, you know what, this is what I'm doing. I've got this time. This is my responsibility in this environment, jail or prison, and these are my obligations. Am I fulfilling those? Is that individual fulfilling those? Because it's easier in prison. I know what that sounds like, but prison is a very micro structure of what the great big world is. There's rules in there, just like there's outside. And it's one of those things that if structure collapses, the moment pressure lifts, then the release is actually premature. They're not ready for that, because again, I've seen guys that have done a great job, guys that have used the Behind Bars Blueprint system while incarcerated, fantastic job. But the moment they release, they step away from the system, they step away from the process, and next thing you know, I get reports that they're heading back to prison or jail. So it's one of those things where look for the warning signs of readiness or the lack thereof. Core principle number 3 is, what is the cost of a premature release? And again, remember, I'm not talking about keeping somebody past their out date. I'm not talking about changing the system to where, oh, gee, this person's not ready, so we're just going to, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the actual moment of release. What is the readiness status of that individual? We're going to get to the conclusion of that in just a little bit here, so just hold on and bear with me. But what's the cost of a premature release? Somebody that's released and they're just not ready. Well, let's be honest, a lot of families turn into involuntary probation officers or parole officers, right? You're overseeing somebody who should know better, somebody who's been used to doing things a certain way for a long time, and then they get out here in the great big world, and now you as the family member or the loved one, you're having to pull supervision almost if not more than the probation or parole officer. So that's part of the issue with a premature release or someone who is not ready. Churches, they absorb crisis that they just were not meant to manage. They just weren't built to handle. There's a lot of family crisis that can come about from this, and people lean heavily on their churches, and they should. But a lot of times churches just aren't in a position or trained or prepared to navigate something along those lines. Probation, let's be honest, probation or parole, when they get somebody coming out, what would you prefer? Somebody coming out that's stable, somebody that's been working, that's been putting a system in place, that's been making progress, or someone that comes out and just shows absolute utter instability? I think we all know the answer to that. And again, that's what I try to tell a lot of the guys that I work with in this program, men and women both, that your job with your probation or parole officer, one of your main issues, one of your main focuses needs to be, hey, I want to be a non-issue for this person. I don't want them to worry about, gee, am I going to go off the rails? Am I going to fail to comply? Am I going to show up late? Whatever the case may be. Do what you say you're going to do. Be what you say you're going to be when you say you're going to be there, that kind of thing. Which brings us to core principle number 4. Why is this so hard to say? Why is this so hard to maybe admit? And I'm not saying that the systems or institutions or administrators, jails, probation, parole, families, I'm not saying that them as a whole. I'm saying just as in general, why is it difficult to say, hey, look, there's just, the bottom line is there's just some people who are simply not ready to be released. They're setting up to fail. They're going to be released and they're going to fail. And nobody wants to be that person. Nobody wants to be viewed as being hard. Nobody wants to be viewed as keeping somebody past their due date. Nobody wants to be accused of cruelty, all that stuff. And that's what I'm talking about. Again, I'm not advocating for someone to stay past their due date. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that if a system can't legally delay release, but release is clearly premature for the individual, then what's the answer? Which brings me to the 5th and final principle, and that is basically, what does not yet mean? If somebody's not yet ready to be released, what does that look like? Why is that something that we need to even focus on? It can be pretty ambiguous. It can be very vague. We can get lost in the shuffle, and that's not what we want. In order to get clear results, and we say this all the time at Behind Bars Blueprint, you have to have clear goals, clear direction, clear action plan. You have to default to action on that. And a lot of times we have good intentions, we've got lofty goals, but we don't really have a good articulated plan on how to get there. It's one of those things where it sounds good and it makes people feel good, but they're not really making progress. If you can't articulate, if you can't say, what does readiness look like, your decisions are guesswork at best, and that's not what we're here to do. And that's the 5th principle. So we have to define what does not yet look like. And we've kind of covered some of that in this video, some of the previous principles that we've gone over here. But you have to be able to say, okay, and on the flip side of that, which is very important, is then what does readiness actually look like? What is it supposed to look like? And how can we make sure that happens? And that's what we talk about here at Behind Bars Blueprint. At B3, we do not advocate for longer incarceration. Again, I can't say that enough. There's going to be somebody, I'm sure, that's going to take this the wrong way. That is not what we are advocating for in any way, shape, or form. We are arguing for a readiness-based system that is put in place from the time of incarceration, so when the out date comes, you're ready. I'm not saying indefinite pushing. I know there's some countries that do that. I know there's a train of thought that would line up with the, hey, you're out when we say you're out. We don't agree with that, okay? Because we think there's a better way. You've got time. The system has time. Use this system, put it in place so when your out date comes, you're ready to go. It's one of those roles. We have to define roles. We have to define expectations and, transitional thresholds and all that stuff and all the fancy words that make it sound important, right? But what we're really saying is what? Use your time with a proven system that when the time comes, when your out date clicks, you're ready to go. You've set things up. You're not leaving it to guesswork. You know what readiness looks like. You know what success looks like because you've been preparing for it the entire time. Behind Bars Blueprint, we believe that everyone deserves a path forward. Everyone deserves a path forward. We also understand that not everyone is ready for that path at the same time or at the same place. It's something that you have to be, it's coming, and that's the one thing that is a constant, that's one thing that is consistent that we can measure is for those of you that have outdates, for those of you that are making progress towards that outdate, then you have to have a readiness plan for that. It's, release without readiness is not hope. It's basically abandonment. It's a trap. I'll be quite honest with you, everybody. It's a trap. If you are released, and I'm not saying it's put in place to trip you up, I'm not throwing shade at the system. I'm saying that if you are released without a clear plan or at least a solid idea of what you are trying to accomplish, what your next step is, all that, then it's a trap. You're just, the clock's ticking, and the clock's ticking on when that door is going to swing back open for you and you're going to go back inside. Look, it is how do you realistically navigate this system so you and your loved one are successful, and guess what that sets you up for? When they're released, you're already halfway there. You don't have to start all over. You don't have to relearn everything. You've already been building systems and putting foundations in place that make a difference. So when your loved one finally comes home, you hit the ground running. Guys, again, I hope this helps. If you wouldn't mind, please like and subscribe. You can also leave a comment down below, or you can email me at behindbarsblueprint@gmail.com. Again, check out the website, www.behindbarsblueprint.com. Keep the faith, guys, and until next time, stay strong.